welcome to the Marketing Share, everyone. Thanks for joining us. This is the show where we cover what marketing leaders need to know to run marketing. I'm Alec Chung, and with me is my co-host, Barb Van Summeren. Hey, Barb, how's it going today?
Hey, it's great.
We're good, right? It's springtime, so feels like the winter is slowly receding to the background. So it's good, new beginnings.
Speak for yourself. In Chicago, it was snowing this morning.
Okay, well, for some of us and others of us, like perhaps our guest, who maybe live in. Well, actually, no, Kyle doesn't. You get winter too. So
Yeah,
some guests though probably get come from the warmer climate, so they don't have to worry about that stuff. But anywho, let's get to the show. As I often like to say, in this show, we cover what marketing leaders need to know to run marketing, and that usually means we kind of bring in generally two types of guests. Sometimes we're going to bring in a guest because of a particular area of expertise that'll help you as a listener kind of go deeper in an area that you might be wanting to feel like you want to shore up. And other times we're going to bring in guests that kind of represent the kind of people we're hoping, get value with the show, which is marketing leaders, especially new marketing leaders. And so today we've got one of the latter. And so it's always cool when we can talk to, a marketing leader about what it's like running the marketing department. So Barb, I'm going to let you introduce our guest.
Yeah, great. Today we have Kyle Rutledge with us, and I'm super excited to talk with Kyle because he's a digital marketing professional with over a decade of marketing experience. But what I love is you've also had experience in in-house agency world, and in contract roles, right? So that's a great background. You've helped multiple companies grow and have successful exits, which is also super powerful, I think, in today's world. And your last role, you headed up marketing for a seed stage SaaS startup. So that's super relevant. Anyway, right now you're doing some pay-per-click and some CMO fractional work. So what a great background. And I'm excited to learn. Welcome, Kyle.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So why don't you open up by just telling us a little bit about your background and kind of some things you've learned along the way, and maybe a little bit about your agency experience, because that was kind of some of your starting roles.
Yeah, for sure. So, as you mentioned, I've been in-house, I've been contract work, and I've been agency. So going back to the very beginning of 2012, I got my start in marketing, actually on a video production team. I was self-taught video producer, did that for a year, and then moved into some graphic design work on a marketing team. And what was interesting is as I got that first job, same company actually, but as I moved more from video to the graphic design stuff, I actually ended up doing more digital marketing than anything else, So I ended up doing about 20% design work, and then 80% of my time was across anything they needed: organic social, email, events, paid social, paid search. I ended up doing a lot of it was self-taught. And what's interesting is the PPC portion specifically, I self-taught using blog articles from the agency that I worked for in the future, Disruptive Advertising. So that was a fun, roundabout situation that came. When I left that company, that in-house role, it was a media company. They had a tech component as well, so a SaaS/media company. When I left them, I went freelance, and so I was freelancing PPC work and some graphic design stuff. Did that for about 2 years, and then I ended up working, like I said, for that digital marketing agency, Disruptive Advertising. And it was great because I had self-taught based off of their materials, so I knew how they did things, right?
Really?
And then I also brought them a client, right? When I signed up with them, it's very typical to have non-competes, and so I brought them one of the clients that I was working with as well. So ended up working out very, very well.
Wow. That's a really great background. And so many of us and so many of our listeners have come from one aspect of marketing and, all of a sudden find themselves running several. And you actually were self-taught in several areas. So kudos to you on that. Um, just give people an eye view of what's the upside and maybe the downside of working in agencies from your perspective.
Yeah. Agency work, as most people know, is very fast-paced, very can be overwhelming at times, stressful. And I think that a lot of the stress comes from there's just so many tasks that can be done, right? You really can't do everything that you want to for all your clients. And there's so many balls in the air at one given point that it can be stressful having that feeling of like, am I gonna miss something? Is it there a critical deadline that's gonna come and go and I'm not gonna realize it, right? So that's one of the downsides. One of the main upsides that I see is you're seeing hundreds, if not thousands, of companies' marketing campaigns. And so you really get to see like how a good setup looks, how different companies operate in the marketing realm and across different segments, right? So how do all these different companies work together between PPC and SEO? How do you correlate the email portion, whether that's campaign sends or automated drip sequences? And so you really get a really good view, a high level view of how the marketing machine should work. And that experience is just so valuable.
Yeah, I like one of the things that is so cool about marketing is that there are so many different areas of marketing, and so we all come up from a particular area. So it's great hearing about like your particular journey, how you went from self-taught but into the agency world. It's also though the fundamental reason why leading a marketing team is so challenging because you know the areas that you know, and then now in addition to having to lead a team for the first time, you're also rapidly exposed to all the things that maybe you didn't know about marketing, but now you're supposed to because you're the one in charge of marketing. So let's move on to that. Let's talk about your most recent role, stepping into your first leadership position, running the marketing department. What kind of company was that, and what was that experience like for you?
Yeah, for sure. So the company that I moved to, I guess I should say Disruptive, the agency, I was there for almost 5.5 years. So I was working in PPC, got a lot of experience and exposure with the paid socials. And then the last almost 2 years of my time there, I was working as a fractional marketing director for our clients. So I was overseeing the projects and the platforms and making sure that everybody was rowing in the same direction and we were all aligned to the same marketing goal as a blended team, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then making sure that aligned with the client's business goals and making sure that we just everything was synced up really. And so that's a very similar structure to the role that I was given moving to this seed stage startup. They were in the legal tech software area, and they were just about to go into their Series A round of funding. As you mentioned, one of the hard parts of going into a role like that is like, I was the first full-time marketing hire,
Yeah.
I have experience in a lot of different things and managing a lot of different things. And then going into a role like that where there's not fundamental setup, right? One of the first big projects that we worked on was just revamping the website because the functionality wasn't there. We couldn't embed forms the way that we wanted to. We couldn't build the right automations that we wanted to. And then just candidly, the site wasn't mobile friendly and didn't have great SEO. And so just solving a lot of those fundamental issues, I think was, one of the first big challenges, getting a good foundation.
Yeah. You mentioned, in the agency world, I think that's a great insight that, you have access to best practices across many, many companies, right? I can remember that too. In the agency world, you have access to multiple businesses doing it, right? So you can really tease out best practices versus when you've been in a company a long time, you might have expertise in that particular company, which is great, but it's a little insular, isn't it? So those are the
Yep.
kind of back and forth of that. And then as you say, um, as the single contributor in a startup is very, very different, right, than an established company, different stages of companies, and where they are. So that's amazing. And then, if you're fixing fundamental issues in one case, right, and you're advancing things to help the marketing mix in another case. So how did you do that transition? So as the first marketing hire, how did you work with leadership to say, wow, we really have to fix some of these, fundamental issues before we do other things?
Yeah, that's one of the challenges. It always is, right? And moving from an agency to in-house, it's often referred to as like, no, I only have one client, you know? And working at the agency, one of your biggest jobs and responsibilities is expectation setting, right? Setting correct expectations and resetting those expectations and resetting them again and again, because as soon as something happens where maybe it's not explicitly said, but based off of your behavior, there's a certain set of expectations that start to grow, right? Where, for example, going into this startup, oftentimes the sales team would come and ask for, some sales enablement documents, the battle cards, case studies, all these different assets that they can use in the sales cycle. That's great. I was helping build those, and it's also hard to know like in what area of priority does this come in? If I'm always and then like based on my behavior, if I'm always accepting their requests, then they have that expectation that whatever they ask, they'll receive. So it's expectation setting. And then also, we'll probably touch on this here shortly with the CEO and the leadership team as well, right? So, hey, we don't have fundamentals set up. It's going to take a while to get, a new site built. It's going to take a while to get all of the data that we want, the data in HubSpot cleaned up and accessible in a dashboard so that we can pull good insights and know where we should be spending our marketing dollars. And so just giving those expectations up front and clearly was I don't want to say challenge, but something to manage for sure.
Yeah, it definitely is something that you really have to deliberately and proactively kind of get out in front of that. I mean, because even though I think you're right, like managing an agency, of course, it's a client relationship management thing, but there's a slightly different feel to it now, though, when you're inside, right? You still have to do it. And I know for me, for instance, like it something that obvious, it's not immediately obvious to you sometimes when you first jump into it, but you think, so let's just focus on, okay, I gotta get the work done, I gotta do this, I gotta knock out all these deliverables. And you sometimes forget that, oh, hey, I still do need to kind of like have this client relationship, you know, thinking in the background too, right? Make sure they know, look, this is what we're focused on and why. These are our deliverables. Are we still in alignment about those things? I think that's still really, really important. Especially when you're at a startup, and especially when you've got a small team, and it's difficult to kind of what am I trying to say here? It's difficult to sometimes to stay aligned, even though it's a small organization and a startup. I think that reflects a little bit of your experience. I remember you talking a little bit about that when we were kind of, prepping and planning for this.
Yeah, definitely. And on that, I think one of the hard parts is making sure that you have that time to sync up with the leaders, right? With the leadership team, and making sure that everybody is on the same plan, right? The same, that our strategies are aligned and that they know what I'm working on. And one of the difficulties that I had in this role was just getting that FaceTime and being able to share like, hey, these are all the things that I've been working on, why we're working on these things, and how it's coming along, right? That time was, it's a busy time in the company. Going into a Series A round of funding is no small joke. And I was reporting to the CEO, and he was also going to a lot of events, which is a big deal in the legal industry. And so there was just no time, right? And so if I were to go back, that's one of the things I would have been very clear on, is like, hey, I know that there's going to be a ton of stuff, and I really need this alignment with you, right? Like it's critical to my success in this role. And if we're not aligned, then this isn't going to work out very well.
Yeah. As a compare and contrast, you're telling a great story here, right? In the agency world, you have a marketing person that's your client usually, right? And they know what you do. When you go into a startup, you actually now are managing across multiple functions, and they don't know what you do as much as you do, right? So your storytelling and your framing has to be at a much higher level in organizations, right? And to your point, if I'm in sales, I want to know what you're doing, marketing person, to actually advance my work, right? And if you're in operations, I want to know how you're efficiently using our funds, right? So you really have to have a different mindset of how to frame what you do to all the different stakeholders that you have in the leadership team, right?
Right. Yeah, that's a big item, a big challenge.
So what else would you tell a new marketing leader coming into a startup like that? Make sure they have time with the leader. What else?
I kind of referred to this, but one of the big challenges is just knowing of all the different tasks that we could be working on. And I said prior that I was the only full-time marketing hire. We did have one part-time employee, and we did have 2 or 3 contractors that we worked with. And so across all of our skill sets, what's going to be the biggest bang for your buck, really? Like, that was one of the hardest things for me to figure out is, hey, there's so many things that we could be doing, and all of this is important to get to eventually, but what is the most important thing? And then also leaning into the skill sets of the team. And one of the things that helped me a lot was, I came in and realized our data and tracking and HubSpot instance was not set up for success, right? And so I went out and found some contractors and started interviewing contractors because we wanted to find someone to help us do this. And not just hiring the first contractor that you find, but you gain a lot of clarity in interviewing candidates, contractors versus employees. I did this with a content marketing role as well. And you gain a lot of clarity by talking to them, and each of them will bring up different pieces, right? And then after having those 5-10 conversations, you really get a good vision and a good picture of what this should look like. And so I think that was an impactful piece for me, to know like what does good look like in areas that I might be weak in.
Mm. That question comes out a lot. I think that's one of the hardest things. What does good look like? I know tons of marketers we're always asking that question. Like, how do I know are my open rates good enough? Is this on average? Or is this what people spend on pay-per-click? Or am I spending too much, too little? Those are some of the most common questions. And there's so many areas that you have those questions on. So it's definitely a tough one, but you hit on it. You hit it right on, which is that's a fundamental question I think that we're always asking ourselves. Let me switch to asking a little bit about, so to now today, I think you're doing freelance work, and your area of specialty is around kind of like pay-per-click and demand generation. So let me ask you a little bit about that, because that's an area that maybe some listeners would want to learn a little bit more about. If you were talking to a new marketing leader who didn't know much about pay-per-click, right? What are the key things that you would want that person, or you think that person should understand in order to be able to oversee what's going on in that area?
That's A loaded question. There's a lot that goes into that, and one of the things that I like to think through is like, is search the right platform, the right area for us to be in, right?
Great.
And that's something that we experienced with this SaaS startup. Is what we're offering is a new concept, and so people don't know what this concept is. They don't know to search out for this specific thing. Right? They might be searching for a related problem that our solution solves for.
You see?
So I think just getting clear on that is like, do we need to be in front of people and pushing more towards, socials or YouTube, or, getting in front of them? Or is it more about pull marketing where it's like, hey, they're searching for this. And so I think just fundamentally, that's like one of the big questions that I'd ask. And then also, like, do you have a fundamental understanding of the marketing math for your business, right? So what are the goals for the year? How much does marketing need to contribute? Do you have a pipeline multiplier based off of a specific close rate, right? And then how many leads or how many open deals does that equate to? How many leads do you need to get to one open deal? What's your cost per lead? Working backwards from the end back to the beginning, and knowing like, are we getting an adequate cost per lead? Do we have enough budgets to make this a reality? And then also realizing that scaling isn't linear, right? So if we need to double budgets to achieve our goal, you're gonna see a decrease typically of 20% in your cost per lead, right? Or an increase, I'd say. So it gets less efficient as you scale that, because you're targeting colder and colder audiences.
Okay.
So, and then a big piece about PPC now is the data piece. Do you have good data? Are you tracking everything, and are you getting that data back to, in most cases, Google Ads, right, for search? Are you getting that data back into the platform so that machine learning and AI algorithms can learn off that and target better for you? That's what's going to give you the best results.
Okay. Well, so let me dig into that a second, or clarify that. When you say, do you have good data, are you talking about data coming back to you, or are you talking about good data put in?
Yeah. So the concept, it's called end-to-end tracking, or Google calls it OCI, offline conversion imports.
Yeah.
Right. So we're advertising on Google. We're getting all sorts of leads, right? But are we tracking in our CRM in the back end how many of these leads make it to an MQL, a marketing qualified lead, or sales qualified lead stage?
Okay.
Or open deals, and then getting that information about the user, right? A lot of times this is tracked from what's called a Google Click ID. And then as you see customers move down the funnel, you import that data back to Google Ads, and then you can stop going for a conversion that's just a lead, and you can start advertising for conversions that are likely to turn into an MQL or an SQL or an open deal.
Okay.
I guess you should also explain conversions don't always have the same definition from person to person that you're talking about as well, right? I mean, sales guy thinks conversion is the guy who actually booked a meeting with you, right? Which is totally different in ad language, for sure. So again, it's about educating, right, people. I mean, you don't need to tell them how the watch is made, but you do need to tell them enough to help them frame what you're doing versus what the goals are, to your point, I think. Because, everybody wants a lead that's ready to buy, duh, who doesn't want that? But, the reality of it is, especially for considered purchases, right? You do have to date a bit. You don't get married on the first date, in other words, with your leads, right? So you do have to court them and nurture leads, and you do have to develop a relationship. And hopefully everything that you're doing around brand building and thought leadership is adding to that metric, because nobody makes a decision in a vacuum anymore, right? Not that we ever did. But I think those are important things to help our clients understand, or our CEO and partners and so forth, anybody that we work with.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And to your point about the what is a conversion, I think you'd be surprised at how often people consider a conversion like a closed deal,
Yeah,
or a
exactly.
purchase, right? And so you're right, being very clear in your terminology is very important, and just that educational piece across functions of like,
Right. So for a
right.
pay-per-click, tell people what tell people what a conversion is.
Most of the time, a conversion traditionally has been tracked as a form submission or a phone call. It's that initial lead. More recently, Google implemented a system that's you can track as many things as you want, and you get to determine what's a primary conversion versus a secondary conversion. The secondary conversion you'll track, you'll gather the data, but only primary conversions you will you tell Google, hey, this is the type of conversion that we want to get more of, right? And so whatever that may be, maybe we turn off the initial lead and only push towards marketing qualified leads, right? So we don't want just any leads anymore. Of course, we're going to be getting those in order to get the marketing qualified leads, but we really want people that progress down funnel, right? And so in today's world, you get to choose what that conversion means. The best practice, though, like it's kind of a game that you need to play with Google, where you need a certain amount of data flowing into the account per day, right? You need one of those conversions per day on average, or 30 in a month per campaign, right? And so I can't just go to Google and say, hey, I only care about customers that are closing deals. If you're not getting one closed deal per day from your PPC efforts, that's not going to give you enough data for Google to optimize off of, right? And so you'll start with the leads. As soon as you're getting MQLs at one per day, you can turn off lead and focus on MQLs. As soon as you're getting SQLs at one per day, you turn off MQL and you start focusing on SQL. And you continue going down the funnel until you're getting those high quality leads. And that will also mitigate a lot of the spam and bot traffic and trash that you often get at the beginning of your time running PPC campaigns.
That is a really helpful tip. I think understanding the detail and mechanics of just the strategy behind that. So thank you for sharing that. One thing I wanted to go back and ask you about, you mentioned how important it is to understand your marketing math. So what if I'm at a company and I don't quite have a good grasp on that yet? Do I need to figure that out first before I even dare to go do any of this stuff? Or is it okay to kind of like, look, just jump in and figure it out as you're kind of optimizing? What would you say there?
Yeah, I think it's based really on your risk tolerance, right?
Okay.
So, I don't think it's a bad idea for you to start running some campaigns and figure out, what does this look like? Right? If I were to run a campaign like this, how much does it take for me to get a lead, right? Or that conversion of whatever conversion you're tracking. On the flip side, though, it's really hard to know what, again, going back full circle, what does good look like?
Yeah.
It's really hard to know what good looks like, and if this campaign is being profitable for you, if you don't understand your marketing math.
Yeah.
How much does it take for us to get these closed deals from this PPC channel, or any channel for that matter? And what's the margin on that closed deal? And does the advertising cost cover that? And there's a whole nother component of like, is it an annual recurring deal? What's the average lifetime of this contract based off retention rates? And so there's a lot that can go into that, and it's pretty unique per business.
Okay. Yeah.
It really is.
Yeah.
And especially if you've got a new client, like in your example, you had a SaaS business, new. They might not have even had HubSpot stood up yet, right? So the question then becomes is, hey, there's going to be a period of time where we have to kind of understand what these metrics are looking like from the CRM all the way to the, top of the funnel. And as that improves, as we get kind of at least an alignment of what our benchmark is, then we can start to improve and push some of these levers to improve performance. So let me ask you this. How, in most cases, and I know you're going to say it depends, but in most cases, like on a pay-per-click, how long should it take for you to at least see some learning, even if it's a brand new campaign, right? How long will it take to at least get some learning? And then once you have learning, you can place some bets as far as improvement goes. What do you think?
Yeah, you can gain initial data within the first 2 to 4 weeks. Another thing that I see often is the companies, they want to kind of tiptoe into it, right? And not spend a whole lot because they don't know how it's going to go. And I totally
Right.
understand that logic.
Right.
The flip side to that is if you were to spend twice as much, you get data back twice as fast,
Yeah.
right? And so you kind of have to, for lack of a better term, you're going to sink money at the beginning.
Yeah.
And you don't know what's going to happen. And that's getting initially started is by far the hardest part for, any PPC campaigns or any paid channel, because you don't know what that's going to look like. You don't know how long it's going to take until you get that first conversion. It's like, is my conversion tracking broken or is nobody actually converting? It's like, sometimes it's hard to figure that out. And so, it's a little bit nuanced depending on how much you want to spend and how long you want that to take. But what I would say is typically within the first month or two, you'll get a good benchmark of like, what does a cost per lead or cost per whatever look like for this? And then also realize that, especially with PPC, that's probably the worst results you're ever going to get. Right? Because there's so much maturing to those campaigns and optimization that can go into it afterwards, after you get some initial data.
Yeah.
And you can start figuring out how to tweak things and make it better. So in general, what I've seen with clients over the last few years is, say that a cost per lead is $200. Over the next 6 months to a year, we could probably get that down to $100. So you could typically cut it in half.
Okay.
That's great.
It's a good benchmark for what good looks like. So great share there. Pretty close. Kyle, I want to thank you for sharing kind of your expertise, sharing your experience, both as a first-time marketing leader, but then also, as a specialist in the area. If people want to get in touch with you, where should they come find you?
Yeah, probably the best place is LinkedIn. I'm pretty active on the platform. They can reach out to me anytime.
Sounds great.
Great. Thanks so much, Kyle.
Yeah, thanks for having me.